Would love to start this morning by asking you to just reflect for a minute and go with me. If you will close your eyes, I want to take you to the Great Smoky Mountains. I can hear the ums and ahs, so I can tell how you feel about being in the Smoky Mountains, and you're going on a hike. You are going down the trail. Over to your left, you see a beautiful green space. You see beautiful flowers. Maybe now at this time of year, you're beginning to see the fall leaves begin to change on the trees. You see a little... I bet you can relate to that feeling that you've had sometime, maybe literally when hiking, not sure which way to go, or in your career, when you've come to this point of what I call a crossroads, or that fork in the road, and you're not sure what turn to take, and you want to make sure that you get to the right destination point. In fact, statistics are on the side of most definitely you're going to face a crossroad in your career at some point in time. You may have been at a point like me across the course of my career where, in addition to times where many of those examples that I mentioned, but also when I was laid off a little over 10 years ago. And my biggest crossroad was, now what is next? What am I going to do now? I know that you have experienced that feeling as we talked about our path in the Smokies at different points in your career. And I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the crossroads that you are facing, maybe right now, or have faced, or maybe you anticipate facing in the future? So what are some of the situations that you've dealt with in your career that are crossroads? What are some of those? Relocating? What we want to accomplish today is really to look at that stress. Where does that emotion show up, and how does it show up and manifest itself in our lives? Then secondly, we want to unpack 7 steps that you can take to help you to successfully move through those emotional times, those crossroads, those forks in the road that you come to in your career. And then this will give you a guide that you can come back to time and time again when you face these points in time. You have a couple of handouts at your table that you'll want to make sure that you have a copy of, because we're going to work through these as we go forward today. They look like this. When we're at this point in our crossroads, we're at this fork, we're trying to decide, do I turn this way or that way? Oftentimes, we're just afraid of making the wrong decision, or we've made a decision in the past that hasn't turned out exactly like we thought. I always say, be careful when you make a decision, because the grass may look really green from here, but once you get there, the color is often just a little duller than it was when we were on the outside looking in. So you want to be careful and conscientious about that. So sometimes we can get stuck. We get stuck and don't want to make a decision sometimes, and so sometimes we settle with where we are because we don't know what to do or how to move ahead, or the emotion is so heavy on us and it creates a lot of stress. So I want to deal with and talk about the emotion that these crossroads present to us sometimes. The first question I want you to ponder and think about is, what emotions surface when you're going through a crossroad? And here's how I want us to deal with these emotions. You have some Post-it notes at your table. Grab a Post-it note pad or share some. If you don't have enough, we have a few extra pads too if you need them, or you can tear them apart. And what I want you to do, write down on each Post-it, so an individual Post-it per emotion. Just write down the emotions that surface for you when you go through a crossroads. Then as you go on your pad, a few of those written, come over here. There's a flip chart over here, emotions. Come over, put your Post-it notes on this flip chart, and I want you to speak those emotions as you place them on the flip chart. I know that we'll have multiple people talking at once, and that's okay. But just come on up when you get your emotions, write them on here, speak them. Let's release them as we put them on the flip chart. what are some of those emotions that you experience? What's up for us is we have hope, we have stress, we have loss of sleep, doubtful, persistent worry, lack of confidence, easily agitated, shut down, lack of sleep. How do we move past that point? We're going to look at a process for you, this guide for you, this roadmap for you to move forward with confidence. So we're going to follow your gut, objectively evaluate your situation, reframe your stress, weigh your career goals and outcomes, assess your options, roadmap your path, decisively act, and celebrate. So that's the journey for the rest of our time together today. Following your gut is just using that sense that we have, which we call women's intuition, right? We have that women's intuition. Good thing we have that, right? Good thing we have that. So we use that women's intuition oftentimes to help us to just recognize that something's going on here. You know, I'm not comfortable. And here, in following your gut, even though we're at a point of, we know we often need to make a decision at this point, the decision is not necessarily to change, but it is that we just need to consider a change, is what that gut is telling us. How does intuition show up in you? Sometimes, where does your intuition, how does it come out? How do you know that your gut is speaking to you? What are some of the ways that your gut is speaking to you? We want to make sure that we don't make a purely emotional decision, that we get through that emotion, have an opportunity to release some of that emotion so that we can then have a more intentional, thoughtful process to come to the best decision for us for that particular point in time. The other thing is that your decision and your path at this crossroad is going to be your own, nobody else's. You're going to get a lot of advice and a lot of opinions. You can take that gracefully, but also consider it very thoughtfully. Okay, and through this process, you'll be able to, there'll be some opportunities, and I'll encourage you to get some of that input and feedback and counsel, but you need to sleep on it a little bit and see what that tells you. Let's take a look at your handout. There are a couple of things I want to do. One is on this handout, that has all of the questions. So I'm going to provide you, this provides you with a series of questions to ask yourself when you're at these points and through each of these steps of the process to help you to move through. So what kinds of questions do we have, can we ask ourselves when we are deciding that it's time to consider a change? So, why do I feel that I need to consider a change? Your second step is to objectively evaluate the situation. Oftentimes when we are in the middle of a situation, we see things from our own perspective. We're in the middle of it, we are emotional about it. There's one way that we see it. It's hard for us to be objective, especially when we feel like things may not be quite as fair as we hope that they would be, or that we wish we had the opportunities that we would like to achieve, and they are not necessarily turning out that way. So in that case, we need to make sure that we are getting some insight from others. That's an opportunity to invite some of that counsel, to be able to objectively see the situation from different perspectives. Oftentimes there's more there than meets the eye, as in this particular image that's here on the screen. So what I want you to do for a minute is work with a partner at your table. Take a look at this image. What do you see there? As you converse, what are you seeing that the other person doesn't see? And as you put your collective thoughts together, what may be the broader story that's going on here? So take a minute to absorb this image and see what you think. Now, this has sparked some interesting conversation. I see some heads turning, and some, pointing out and some squinting, a little bit. So what are some of the things that you observe here? Did everybody see the same thing at the same time? You see some things differently in this image. Yeah, so what are some of the things going on here? Some people are still looking. We're going to have to keep this up all day to make sure that everybody can find every detail that's here. So what are some of the things that you observe here? What's going on in this image? Let's look at the third step here when you're at your crossroad, and that is to reframe your stress. So we recognize a lot of the stress that we're going through when we come at these points of these crossroads and how they show up in the emotions and the stress that we have and the interpersonal relationships and at work and at home and all of these things that we deal with. But to reframe our stress helps us to take the negative often that we're feeling, and we did have some pieces of bright spots. We had some excitement over there. We had some hope that showed up in those emotions and some of the outcomes that we were looking at on your Post-it notes. So what we want to do is really grow that hopefulness, grow the positive energy so that we have the energy that we need in order to work through these tough situations and these tough decisions that we're facing. These could be life-altering decisions that we're going to make. Whatever choice you make, it's going to affect your career, it's going to affect your personal life as well. One of the ways that we can reframe our stress is to just breathe. Sometimes just breathe. And like Miranda said earlier, is to give ourselves a little grace. I love that one. Give ourselves a little grace, first of all. And with that grace, just take a moment to breathe for a minute. Sometimes just taking that moment of silence, or when we're in a tough situation, or we're feeling that stress, if we take just a minute, it will help clear our mind and clear a lot of the stress in our body. I want to go through a quick box breathing exercise with you, just to give you a tool to help you to reframe your stress and to breathe when you get that moment. And you can use this when you have 30 seconds, when you have a minute, or when you have 20 minutes to be a little more still. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes again, and I'm going to ask you to back away from your table just a little bit so that you can sit up. You can put your hands on your knees, relax those shoulders down, relax your shoulders, and close your eyes and just relax for a minute and just start to breathe a little bit and begin to just feel your breathing. Just feel that connectedness inside. Your breath fueling your body. Sort of beginning to calm down the anxiety, the things that we're thinking about, all the things that are going on in our head. Breathe slowly and take that breath from your chest into your diaphragm. Which will help you to breathe more slowly. The next step is to weigh your career goals and outcomes. And here you want to think about, what is the vision for the career and the life that I want to have? How do I want things to be? What is the work that I really want to do? What are the outcomes for my life that when I look at the paths that I have as options will help me to get there? Sometimes there's information that we can gather from a mentor, an advisor, or a coach, or someone who can help us to think through this. There also might be information that we may not be privy to, both with this and then the next step that I'll talk about too, that someone like a mentor or even your boss sometimes can provide some insight that help you to really see what your potential options may be, or to really think about your goals and how do we align that with the options that we might have in the next step. So let's look at some of the questions that come up for us as we weigh your career goals and outcomes. Now that we know what our career goals are and the outcomes that we're looking for, the things that we need to consider personally and that we're considering professionally, now we can begin to look at what our options might be. So that's exploring and researching those potential options and then assessing them, going back and aligning those potential options to the goals and outcomes that we desire in a very, very specific and intentional way. Now, in part of the conversation and part of what we talked about is you weigh your career goals and then come to assess your options. People don't know how to help you in this stage if you don't have any idea of what it is you're interested in. So the previous step of weighing your career options and your outcomes is critically important for you to, one, begin to narrow down the big world of possibilities that you could do next, and to be able to communicate that so that people know how to help, or they know how to think about you, think of you when roles do come up. Oh yes, I remember talking to Vivian and we talked about this. Her interest was like that. Let me reach out to her. I have connected with so many people that way because they were able to share with me more specifically what some of their interests were. So let's look at the next step, which is roadmap your path. And here it really is thinking about, now that I have some priorities, now what are some action steps I can begin to take to help me to move forward? I now have used that emotion as energy now, and I have really thought through what's important to me. I've looked at the alignment of what potential options are based on what my goals and my interests and my expertise may be. I've communicated that and shared that with some people. Now I'm ready to figure out what steps can I take to, one, further explore some of these options, and then two, to be able to take action to make some of these options or my most viable option to happen. So what are some of the questions we can ask ourselves as we roadmap your path? One, what are my most important next steps? Okay, being very thoughtful about that. That vision, our goals, and we have a vision, we've got a roadmap, some action plan, but if we don't actually take that decisive action and use our confidence, because now we've gone through a very intentional process to discover what our most viable options might be, what our interests, what our passions might be, what value I bring and how I contribute to that. We've grown some confidence and we can take that step. Now, step out on confidence, step out on faith to begin putting our roadmap into action. We also want to make sure that we pat ourselves on the back, celebrate those times when we are making progress. Even the smallest bits of progress help give us the energy that we need to continue. We can use those positive affirmations at this point too to help give us that encouragement. What are some questions we can ask ourselves when we are decisively acting? And they are, am I making my career a priority? Have I engaged an objective ally or coach for guidance and feedback? That might be coming up. Or know how to use this process as you have these crossroads that you face in the future. Now I want to ask you to go back with me for a minute to the Great Smoky Mountains and close your eyes again. And now as you are at that crossroad, at that point of indecision about which path to take, it's beginning to get dark. The dusk has set in. But with a little more intentional process, you're using that emotion for energy. Now I know how to make a decision to get on the path that's right for me, to get to the destination that I have set out for myself. You may open your eyes, and congratulations, you have arrived.